Did we lose Gus? I think we may have
Slowly.
lost Gus.
Have everyone
There we
here
go.
once. Am I back? I'm back.
Now you're back.
All right. Good afternoon. Welcome to episode 33 of Duval Rundown. My name's Gus Logue. I'm joined today by Hacker, Mia. Tom is going to be joining us as soon as I can get him added to the stage. We're here to break down the Jacksonville Jaguars' Week 11 loss to the Detroit Lions. It was a 52-6 loss, which is the worst margin of defeat and the most points allowed in Jaguars history. Before today, the team's worst loss was a 44-0 L in 1995 against the Lions. Detroit also scored 7 straight touchdowns in this game, which was the first time since the 2007 Patriots. Jared Goff completed 24 of 29 passes for 412 yards and 4 touchdowns for a perfect 158.3 passer rating, which was the second time in his 9-year career he's done that. He also set career highs for EPA and QBR today. So by the numbers, career best day for Jared Goff, one of the best days in franchise history for the Lions, and probably the worst day, or the worst loss at least, in franchise history for the Jaguars. And so with that, what's your guys' immediate reactions to this game? Hacker, why don't you lead us off?
Follow social media when they land tonight. And look, I've had a lot of people text me and ask me, if I were a betting man, I'd say something happens tonight, it'll get announced tomorrow morning, would be my assumption. Me, I don't know if you have any more light on that, but
yeah, I would.
Somebody's going to pay for. Yeah, somebody's going to pay for this, and it's time for somebody to pay for this.
I was just going to say, Hack, from what I've been told, yes, the expectation is this won't be announced until tomorrow morning, but obviously, and I just heard from a source, Schott is obviously not very happy, and so my expectation is that we won't hear the news that the team is making changes until early tomorrow morning, but certainly if the owner is that disappointed, that's not to say it couldn't happen in the next few hours.
And I guess the question is it the head coach? Is it the GM? All of the above. I know Rappaport came out with his report, Josina Anderson as well. I mean, the bottom line is, and I've got Tommy up here, who I think was on the field for that 44-0 game. It's okay to have an expansion team lose 44-0. As sad as that is to say, they're an expansion team, right? It's the first year out of the gate. When you have the 4th highest payroll and you spent all this money and you go to Detroit and don't even what was the defensive game plan today? Does anybody have any idea what Ryan Nielsen was trying to accomplish on defense? Because I would love to hear if you did. It was an embarrassment of catastrophic proportions, and somebody's going to get fired. It'll happen tomorrow morning, and then we'll move on.
Tommy, welcome. What were your thoughts after watching that debacle?
Well, they suck. I'll tell you that much. They are absolutely terrible. And I would fire. You know what? I truly mean this. I would fire the GM, the head coach, the OC, and the DC. I'm sick of the defense. I'm sitting there looking at the defense and just listening to you, Hack. But think about this. My best 3 defensive linemen by far are Josh Hines-Allen, Trayvon Walker, and Eric Armstead. But they don't play together a lot, hardly at all. I see Armstead on end. I see Ledbetter and Lacey. You might as well have, I don't know, they don't do much. Hamilton doesn't do much. I don't know, man. They are just, and I know people are like, oh, they quit on their coach. Let me tell you something. You quit on your coach, you quit on yourself, you quit on your team, you're a quitter then. And we don't need any of that. I think that the thing that people should look at, because I know I do, look at Detroit. Tell me those players aren't a reflection of the way they play, a reflection of that coach, a reflection of the culture that they've instilled, a reflection of the GM and how they put that team together. They are. Unfortunately, so are we. And that's why we're 2-9 and they're 9-1. Because our GM can't fill this roster, not just with talent enough, but guys that can handle the kind of culture. I mean, look, Dan Campbell's an animal. He's gritty. He's loud and fiery, and his team plays like it. Doug's not. Doug's the opposite. He's kind of a laid back, oh, you know what, we'll work on it type thing. Well, if you're going to have that kind of coach, then you got to have players in there that don't need the coach for motivation, that only need him to call the right plays on Sunday. They don't need anything else. but we don't have that either. So to me, it's a total overhaul. And not everybody, of course. There's players you're going to keep, but there's a lot of players I'm getting rid of. I'm getting rid of those 4 positions I mentioned. If you're going to fire one, fire all 4 of them. Excuse my almost bad language. But I'm sick and tired of it. You know what the highlight of my day, though, was? My 93-year-old mother finally got her out of her assisted living home to come up to the house, sit on the couch. I fed her a sandwich. She was having a great time. And she looked at me and goes, "These guys are awful." And I said, "You're right, Ma. They are awful." And that was the best part of my day, hanging out with her. I'm actually in the car just dropping her off. We had enough, and I listened to the rest of the game on the radio. But I don't know. There's no magic pill. There's no, fairy dust. There's no anything. You're just going to have to start over. And I hate saying that because I don't want to start over. You got a young QB in Trevor Lawrence that's still going to grow, that's still got work to do. You got plenty of talent, but you need more. You got some young guys that you'd keep. But man, it just sucks. And you basically have to start this whole thing over. And I'm telling you right now, Mr. Khan, if you're listening, Tony, if you're listening, somebody told you this was the best team assembled. I assume it's Trent Baalke. You fire that guy for even thinking that, let alone letting it come out of his mouth. Whoever told you that should be fired immediately. I said it when he came out and said it, but even more so now. This is just despicable. And I was part of that 44-0 beat down. They had 3 wide receivers that went over 1,000 yards for the season that year, that game. It was brutal, and we hated it. And Coughlin made us pay for it too. But nonetheless, this team is an embarrassment. They're an embarrassment. I hate saying it, but they are.
So if I could run through a couple different things, I know I have some questions for Tommy. Of course, we appreciate all of you guys listening on YouTube, Facebook, X. Keep leaving your comments. Keep leaving your questions, your thoughts. Yes to DJ Dell. Ever since Trent Baalke stole my bike, we've gone downhill. That actually came at the beginning of 2022 when Trent Baalke was retained, but that's a story for another time. Let's begin with what Hacker noted, the update. So from what I'm hearing around the league, yes, the expectation is that whatever changes are to come, they are expected to come tomorrow morning. I do believe, at least per my reporting and the conversations that I've had today, the expectation is that the Jaguars may not make as drastic of changes tomorrow, as in not eliminating multiple people. And by eliminating, I, of course, mean firing multiple people. I don't want to get to Brian Kelly execution on y'all. Shout out to the Gators, by the way. Point being, I think that there may be more moves made than Shad Khan may have anticipated making when he woke up this morning. We will see if that actually comes to pass. If it does not, for me, my critique of that situation will be that if you are to say, well, I'd rather make this person coach out the string, or I'd rather make this person play out the string as the general manager or the head coach, ultimately, in the words of Jeremy Foley, the former Florida athletic director, what must be done eventually should be done immediately. And that is just kicking the can further and further down the road. And ultimately, as we brought up on Helmets and Heels this week when we had Dan Miller, the play-by-play voice of the Lions, on, how the Lions got to where they are now is that they did fire both their head coach and their general manager with 5 games to go in the 2020 season. And when they did so, their owner then embarked on a 5-week assessment of not only the football operation, but every different department within that organization, was able to form a council of former players led by Chris Spielman, as well as other players and adversaries that helped not only identify Dan Campbell and Brad Holmes as the head coach and the GM, but also identify what it means to be a Lion. And that is something I know we've talked about for weeks and months ad nauseum, years, quite frankly, on the Superstation, that this Jaguars team does not have an identity. What is their identity? And so personally, if I am Shad Khan, that is the route that I am taking. I don't look at this as, well, I need so-and-so to be here to keep running the operation the next 6 weeks. No, like, let the kids figure it out. There's 6 weeks to go. Two more questions, and these are both for Tommy. I do want to make the point that when we say on this program that this team and this organization needs a complete reset, I don't think that is to say it's a bad thing, because the Los Angeles Chargers just went through a full reset. They kept many of those pieces that were not working under Brandon Staley, and they now are working under Jim Harbaugh. And so that's why, Tommy, I think it's important to note that if you are to get the right people in here to lead the operation, I don't think this would be a 3 to 4 year complete reset, because you do have enough pieces here. To which now I ask you, who are those pieces that you would keep? Who are those pieces you would not keep when it comes to the player personnel side?
Yeah, of course, I'd keep 16 all day long. I'm keeping 7. I'm keeping Ingram. I'm keeping Strange. Keeping the backs. I like all 3. But if I had to pick 2, I'd pick Bigsby and pick ETN. I'm not keeping Gabe. Gabe doesn't do jack. You know what? I don't know why he's even here. So he's out. I'm keeping, of course, my defensive ends. I'm getting rid of Armstead unless he plays tackle. I'm sick and tired of him playing end. I don't care what you want. That whole thing just drives me insane, because he was promised to play end, and the GM promised him to play end. So he's like, I'm playing end. Regardless that you need me a tackle, I'm playing end because the GM told me I'm coming here to play end. So whatever that is. So I'm getting rid of him. Miller, I love. I like all 3. I'd probably keep all 3. I'd keep Tyson. Did you see how the safety jumped the other route and left Tyson hanging on that one touchdown? Harlan and Trent Green did a nice job showing that. I think Savage was the safety. I'm not keeping Cisco. I'm kind of tired of Cisco. I don't know, the O-line. I want a badass left tackle. Walker's, he's just not it. I never thought he was. Sheriff's done. We're done with, it's just over. You got Anton, So you have enough. It's not like you have to start. And when I say overhaul, I'm talking, and I really mean it. The coordinators, the head coach, and the GM smell your asses later. I've had enough of you. Like, you've done nothing. And I'm sorry, Ryan Nielsen, you've only been here a short time, but it's not working. And this rotating crap is so dumb. I don't understand it. You keep your best players on the field. When they need a break, you bring it, you give a spell for a player too. By the way, did you see Gibbs on his long-ass run early in the game? He doesn't come off the field. There's no, hey, look at me, I'm tired. Can you, yeah.
I think we lost Tommy in all of his emotion.
His rant, too.
There we go. Now he's back. Tommy, we lost you there briefly. Continue.
I lost you, too. Sorry about that. Anyway, so you got enough is what I'm saying. You just need an overhaul in attitude, in culture, accountability, what's important. You look at Detroit, you know what's important. Everyone on that team. Football. Football's number 1. You can see it. You can see how they perform. And granted, they got a lot of talent. There's no doubt. But they got the right coach, the right GM, and the right talent that fits together with those 2 guys. And that's what you got to do.
Yeah, Ben Johnson picked up on the rotations pretty early. He was doing a good job of just having the Lions go into hurry up whenever 41 or 44 was subbed off of the field. And obviously that was just one of many ways that the Lions were able to find an advantage in this game. Hacker, who do you think is going to be the interim head coach? I want to talk to you, especially since you're about to zoom out to the 5th quarter with Coach Campo and Leon Searcy. So everyone needs to make sure to check that out and check out their reactions. But what are you expecting? I know you're pretty firm in terms of what's going to happen in these next 12 to 24 hours, but who do you think is going to step up in leadership in terms of the coaching staff after tomorrow?
First and foremost, I invite people out to Fleming Island. Are you kidding me? Hurricane Grill and Wings for the 5th quarter coming up here on 1010 XL, 2 and 9. We will be checking the social media accounts every 5 minutes to see what happens. We'll be on from 6 o'clock to 8 o'clock. I mean, the logical choice is Mike McCoy, because he was the head coach with the Chargers, and you would make him the interim, I suppose. Although at this point, does it really matter? I mean, make Jackson DeVille the interim. Who cares? A win at this point is a loss. You want to lose as many games as you can now to get the best draft pick you can. And look, they got 10 draft picks in the 2025 draft, including 2/3 and 2/4. It's only a very deep draft. You're going to have a lot of salary cap room. So from that standpoint, Balky, hopefully he's gone and he left whoever's going to replace him in good standing. But with Jacksonville and Trevor Lawrence, 25 years old, with 10 draft picks, with good cap room, with nice pieces like Brian Thomas Jr. and Tank Bigsby and, guys of that sort, it is a very appealing job. But for the interim, I guess, Gus, if you have to pick somebody, again, I don't think it matters, but Mike McCoy makes the most logical sense just because he was a head coach with the Chargers.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. I wonder if they go to someone like Keith Farwell, though. Pete Prisco is saying that would be his expectation if Pederson does get let go. And I think it makes sense just because Mike McCoy is already going to have a lot on his plate, because I assume that if Doug Pederson goes, Press Taylor is going to follow him out the door. It seems like it would be a weird dynamic if Press stayed and Doug went. And so McCoy is already going to have a lot on his plate in terms of just being the de facto offensive coordinator and offensive play caller, most likely. And so I think for that reason, it probably makes a lot of sense to just go with a special teams coordinator and help Keith Farwell, especially because I think he has a lot of good reviews from people across the league. You can't really find anyone that speaks poorly about him. And then that's kind of what I was thinking earlier when we were talking about Nielsen, and I think what Tommy was saying is what everyone in the comments is saying is just fire everyone, which is totally fair. But if you fire everyone, then you're not really going to have anyone left around to run the ship, and you need it to at least still keep going, right? What do you think,
Right.
Mia?
Yeah, that's that I think was the argument to be made from the con camp, at least from everything I've heard over the last 24 hours, this idea of if you fire everyone, who will actually be left to steer the ship. Ultimately, though, after this loss and after the report from Ian Rappaport and the NFL Network, which, let's be real, this is not, with all due respect, this is not Josina Anderson or a other network that doesn't have the shield on its logo. And so the fact that the NFL Network released that report last night, and then you see a 52-6 final score, that all but says to me that, again, I think the sentiment has to have changed if you're Shad Khan. Yes, there is an argument to be made of you can't fire everyone because then who's left to run the operation? But at this juncture, what is that really doing? What does it do to keep Trent Baalke around for another 6 weeks? What does it do to keep Press Taylor around for another 6 weeks? If you remember the Jonathan Jones report from week 4 on CBS Sports, in which it was all but stated that if Press Taylor was to be let go alongside Doug Pederson, who would be left to run the offensive operation? Well, I'm looking at the Jaguars coaching staff right now. They do have about 8 other coaches on the offensive side of the ball. So there would at the very least be 8 other people that could step into both of those roles. I personally, from my reporting and my expectation, I do believe Mike McCoy will be the interim head coach. I think then the question becomes who will be the interim play caller, because I do believe if Doug Pederson has showed the door, Press Taylor will as well. And so that's where I think it gets very interesting, because the Jaguars could look to one of these younger assistants that they have. Andrew Briner was the offense coordinator at FIU. He also was the head coach at Fordham University, so he does have play calling experience. You could also see them go to Tyler Tettleton, who is the passing game specialist, or as he was given the run game coordinator title this offseason, you could see them also turn to Phil Rauscher, the offensive line coach. However, if you make him the primary play caller, who becomes the offensive line coach? And in turn, you don't really see offensive line coaches getting play calling assignments typically in the National Football League. But at the same time, you could make the argument, and our friend Daniel Griffiths did tweet it out, today was the longest time to throw that any Jaguars quarterback has had this season, and that was despite going up against a Lions defense that is pretty darn good. And so it's going to be, that's the one that I'm most fascinated to see, because I do believe that Mike McCoy will be the interim, but perhaps because of that dynamic, because this idea of, well, then you're asking an unproven young guy to step into that play calling role, maybe because of that, they go for Farwell as the interim head coach. But ultimately, look, I mean, once upon a time, the Colts 2 years ago had, what was his name? Parks Frazier, 30 years old, was a passing game specialist, assistant, and he was thrust into the play calling role for the Indianapolis Colts. And yes, that team only won 4 games, but he had to call quite a few games. And so I don't think it would be completely out of historical trends if the Jaguars were to go that route as well.
Yep. Yeah, I look, and I gotta go. I gotta get the burgers on the grill. My youngest is at dance. He's like, Dad, gotta be here on time. So I gotta get going after. I like McCoy and I like Richard as the defensive coordinator. Let him just step up and be the guy. And I'm sorry, Ryan. I just don't see any change. I don't see Your philosophy's working. The defense is underperformed all year long, for the most part. I like McCoy, especially if Trevor's my quarterback for the rest of the year. After the bye week, and he can call plays. I'd feel comfortable with him. He's a good guy. Look, I don't. I'd rather go with a guy that has at least some experience as a head coach. But like Hack said, does it really matter? Does it really matter for the last 6 weeks or last 6 games? But it's just a shame, man. It's a shame we're here, because I know for all of us on this and everyone listening, nobody thought we'd be anywhere near this. Like maybe 500 would be on the low end. You know what I mean? I mean, I didn't think Super Bowl or anything like that, but my gosh, it's been just brutal. And the way they lose. Now, today's different. They just got thumped. That team, that's a good football team right there, man. That's a physical, gritty, got a ton of athletic talent. That O-line, look at that O-line. I mean, come on. Give Trev that O-line. Give him that O-line, or a O-line like that, that can open holes and keep the quarterback clean for the most part. Just crazy. Just crazy. But hey, what are you going to do? But you do have to do something. I would be shocked if nothing's done. I think Shad should be so mad that just being mad should make him want to fire somebody at this point in the season. But I look, if Doug goes, I think Trent's got to go. I mean, whether now or later, Trent Baalke cannot be the general manager of this franchise moving forward. He's had his time. He's had some good picks. I'm not going to say he hasn't, but overall, he hasn't done the job of a GM for a successful organization.
Well, I don't disagree with any of that, but I can't think off the top of my head of any general manager that's been fired mid-season, so I think we will have to wait a little bit for that. But it'll definitely be interesting.
Just said they did it in Detroit, right?
Oh, really?
Yeah, they did it in Detroit in 2020, and of course, Dave Caldwell was also fired at the end of November.
Kind of a weird year with COVID, so maybe that played into it. But yeah, I say fire their ass. All right, I got to go sour mash some cheap wine and flip some burgers. So you guys have a wonderful night, okay?
All right, Tommy.
Peace
appreciate
and love,
you joining.
fans. Peace and love.
Peace and love. Hacker, I don't know if you recognized any of those names that Mia spit out a couple minutes ago about possible people to run the Jaguars offense, but I want to hear more about names that we might recognize, especially just players on the offense or defense. Who are you looking forward to watching the rest of the year, even if it does seem like a lost season for the team? Obviously, it's a players' league, and there's a lot of players who can continue to develop and try to trend in the right direction. So who are you going to keep your eye on in this post-Pederson era, assuming that's what it is?
I mean, obviously, if Trevor plays, Brian Thomas Jr., certainly, Tank Bigsby, Brenton Strange, Parker Washington, you kind of got to see what you got, man. I want to see Ventrell Miller every play. I want to see him out there every play. He is outstanding. Jerry Jones, I want to see him. It'd be nice to see Mason Smith, right? I mean, you take him in the second round, and guy doesn't play, which is interesting, and apparently he has an ankle injury. Jordan Jefferson's another guy I like to see. Just play the young guys. Again, a win now is a loss. That's where we are. This feels like a Gus Bradley year. It feels like an early Doug Marrone year. You want the highest draft pick that you can get. And look, I mean, if you end up with the number one pick, you could hold that thing ransom for somebody that wants to trade up and take Cam Ward or Milroe or Sanders from Colorado. I mean, you could get a lot for that number one pick. So this does have the potential of turning around very quickly. But if Shad Khan keeps Trent Baalke, justify that to this fan base.
Right.
I mean, you still need to sell tickets, man. Now, you got 3 home games left this year, but then you got to sell tickets. I mean, the clown thing is coming back. I'm sure you guys have seen social media. They're starting to plan that already. We're going to have a sequel. Now, Killer Clowns from Outer Space didn't have a sequel in the 1980s, but, brother, we're going to have a sequel at Everbank Stadium. With the Clowns are coming back, and against, what is it, the last home game of the year? Was it Tennessee? I mean, that's going to happen.
No, it was the Colts. It was the Colts that they beat.
Right, but I'm saying this year. I mean, the sequel this year, the last home game. It's going to be a clown out again, which is embarrassing to say the least.
The clowns are in the comments on YouTube, by the way. They've already showed up in the Duval Rundown comments.
I'm sure it's coming back. And hey, Trent Balk, you got that clown on your desk still? Because I know that was motivation for you. Remember the hunt? He said that you used that as motivation. Well, wasn't very motivating day when you lose by 46 points. Just horrific. And I'm going to Fleming Island, guys, to do the 5th quarter. So please join me. Leon, seriously, Dave Campo, and myself. I will tell you, based in the group chat, Coach is salty right now.
Oh, yeah.
Coach was using some interesting language, as a matter of fact, for Coach's standards. So it'll be quite a riveting show, I'm sure, beginning at 6 o'clock. We hope you join us.
Well, especially good to know, considering Coach will be joining Gus on Tuesday's edition of Duval Rundown. So you get him lathered up and ready to go, Hack. And depending on what happens tomorrow, he could still be just as fired up and expletive-filled. And this is a podcast, so we don't really like to use profane language. But, I mean, I think we have a little less rules, per se, comparatively to our friends on terrestrial radio.
Exactly. Well, I'll talk to you guys later. Hey, by the way, they did not go 3 and out, though, on their opening drive, Gus. So at least we have that going for us. They actually did get a first down.
In the second half, they did go. On the first drive of the second half, they went 3 and out. And they went 3 and out on more drives than they didn't. So I'm going to still give it to you.
Well, Detroit got like a half a mile of offense. So it was an interesting day. But I'll talk to you guys on the 5th quarter.
All right. See you later, Hacker. Thanks for joining. We'll see you next Sunday.
All right, then there were two.
Then there were two. You got any other just like big takeaways from today's game?
Yeah, I mean, from the game itself, I actually almost tweeted midway through the 3rd quarter to sit Brian Thomas Jr. because it's not worth it for him to suffer an injury. We don't know the extent of whatever shoulder, chest injury that he did suffer. I don't think he officially was given an injury designation, at least that I saw, according to the team. But it's going to be a tough needle to thread over the next few weeks because, yes, there is an argument to make that these remaining 6 games are easier comparatively to the gauntlet that you just went through. And so there will be an argument of, well, we could win these games, so Trevor should play. Brian Thomas Jr. should play. XYZ should play. And I think that's going to be very interesting to see whoever is making the decisions, how they weigh those pros and cons, because ultimately, I don't think you want to risk injury to those players, especially knowing, as we've talked about ad nauseum on this show, Gus, so many of those young players are the dangling carrot for so many head coaching and GM candidates that they want to work with these players. But if those players are to suffer significant injuries and then we don't have them in Duval for X amount of months next year, or they're set back behind the 8 ball, you don't want to see that. And like, yes, I see, to Reedy's point, the idea of, I don't want to win. We want a higher draft pick.
He wants Travis Hunter.
Yeah, I know a lot of you want Travis Hunter. I got people texting me asking about Travis Hunter. Look, like, it's very difficult to try and weigh everything accordingly. And that's why the comparison that I keep making, because I do believe, while this may not be the most talented roster that the Jacksonville Jaguars have ever had, the comparison I will continue to make is the Los Angeles Chargers of last year. That was a team that was loaded with talent, lost a ton of one-score games, and truly had a interesting character, let's call him that, as their head coach. And ultimately, his post-game pressers and his inspirational speeches during the week finally grew stale, pun intended, and he was shown the door. And now with a quote-unquote culture reset, in which so many around the league were critical of Jim Harbaugh bringing his strength and conditioning staff from Michigan to Los Angeles, now you are seeing that Chargers team, and yes, it largely is because they run the crap out of the ball, but you are seeing them develop that physical identity, that weight room, we love football, in the face, in your trenches identity. And that has now taken less than a year's time, and they find themselves in a playoff race. Yes, they have a last place schedule. Yes, they picked 5th overall in the NFL draft. But I look at what the Chargers did last year, and I say it can be done here in Jacksonville.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting comparison. It's funny that the Lions and the Jaguars were actually like a huge comparison just about a year or two ago, as like, oh, these two teams are rebuilding, but they're on the rise. The Athletic posted an article in August of last year saying which franchise would you rather be? And obviously at this point, it's not necessarily close, but it'll be interesting to see if and when, I guess, any players do get shut down, because I think it's definitely a conversation worth having, especially with your point that they're kind of the carrots that are dangling for the next people to come in and take over this organization and try to lead it to championships. But at the same time, it just seems weird to sit a 21-year-old rookie and a 25-year-old quarterback who could certainly use the playing experience to continue just developing their own games. And so it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. But I do hope that Trevor Lawrence comes back, just personally. Obviously, I don't want him to get injured, and I think that any fans who say they want to just protect him and focus more on the future, like, that's fair. But I'm curious to see what Trevor looks like in like a non-Pederson offense. Obviously, like, whatever Mike McCoy ends up doing, it isn't going to be that much different from what they're doing now, because you can't just install an NFL playbook halfway through the season, even during the bye week. But I think what you saw today is just what I've been talking about a lot on the show in terms of coaches making things easier for their players, where I said at the top of the show, Jared Goff had the best game of his career stats-wise, but it didn't really look like the best game of his career when you watched him. Like, he's had a few more memorable experiences in my mind, and like, it was a good performance from him that ended up with a crazy stat line. It didn't seem like we were watching the best quarterback in the world today. And then even the same is true, or for the inverse for the Jaguars, where Mac Jones had a pretty terrible performance stats-wise. I know he didn't play well at all, but I wasn't watching it and thinking, oh, this is the worst quarterback in the world, or this is the worst performance I've ever seen. It's just that I think today you saw how much these coaches are able or haven't been able to put their players in easy positions to succeed. And I think that's the biggest thing that you can see in the difference between Mac Jones and Trevor Lawrence suiting up in this offense, is that, like, there's just so little margin of error in this offense. And so when Trevor Lawrence is running it, then it's actually able to get by here and then, because Trevor Lawrence is just so special. But then when you have Mac Jones, who's like just not the best quarterback, especially physically, but just not the best quarterback in general. He was a first-round pick, but it was already on his second team. And so when you have someone who's not able to like make up the differences in that slim margin for error and is not able to compete on an NFL level, just on hard mode with the hard mode switch activated, then that's what you're going to get. You're going to get 6 points this week and 7 points last week, as opposed to competitive games. And so, again, I would understand if Trevor doesn't come back, or if fans don't want him to come back, but I'm personally hoping that we do see him come back and that he's able to build a little bit of momentum under Mike McCoy or whoever ends up being the play caller after the bye.
Yeah, and the reason I bring it up is, again, to make the comparison to the Chargers last year, where Justin Herbert did try to come back and then ultimately ended up having to shut it down after multiple injuries last year. And the idea of, my head coach is gone, we're headed towards a rebuild, I'm out here fighting, but ultimately, is that the best thing for my body? And that is why Justin Herbert ultimately was shut down last year. And to your point, Gus, I could see Trevor Lawrence coming back. It sounds like, health-wise, at least from everything we've heard, there is a chance he would come back. But of course, it ultimately, I think, will come down to not only the doctor's decision. I think Trevor wants to play. I don't think that is a question. I don't think we will ever question his competitive spirit. But if you're his camp, I mean, if you're his agent, if you're his representation, if you're his parents, can you willingly say, yes, I want him to be trotted out into a offense that, yes, at that juncture will no longer be clamped by the chains of Press Taylor, but that has no direction. And so maybe it is an offense that, to your point, with under McCoy and whoever's calling the plays, would have direction. But I think that's where you may have to make a long-term play if you're Trevor Lawrence and his camp. Although, like I said, I think if he can play, he will want to come back and play. We'd like to thank all 3,000 of you. I just did the math real quick in my head. Over 2,000 of you listening on X, over 300 of you on YouTube, and a couple other more over on Facebook. Doug Pederson did just meet with reporters in Detroit. He was asked that if this may have been his final game as Jaguars coach, to which he said, quote, "I can't control that. Listen, I've been around the league a long time. If it's going to happen, it's going to happen, obviously. But at the same time, I have a job to do." He wouldn't rule out making staff changes over the bye, and says it's too soon to say whether Trevor would be ready to play that Week 13 game against the Texans.
Saying that he wouldn't rule out staff changes might be interesting, right? Just because you were on the show last week saying, maybe if his fake son, whatever the right word is, Press Taylor, just ends up walking out the door, that could save Pederson's job for the rest of this season. But you think it's beyond that point?
I do, but can you imagine if that's all that? So I think I don't see a world in which Press Taylor is shown the door and Doug isn't following him out the door personally. Yeah. But can you imagine if that's the only change that's made is Doug says, okay, when we come back, I'm going to take over play calling. And aside from that, everyone stays after this 52-6 debacle. It just can't happen. Folks, I've heard from enough people around the National Football League in the last hour and a half. Like, trust me when I say people around the league are looking at the Jaguars as a laughingstock right now and saying that if there isn't some sort of action that's taken, that's a bad precedent to set if you are the owner and if you are anyone involved with this organization.
We have someone on YouTube. As a Lions fan, thoughts and prayers to all the injured Jags. God bless. Yeah, fortunately,
we got a couple of Lions fans in the chat, and you guys were great. You listened to our Ben Johnson episode from Thursday, I saw. Y'all are great. We love you, Detroit fans.
Hey, the Detroiters are awesome. But, yeah, I don't really have anything else to add. I'm excited for the post-bye season. Even if Trevor Lawrence and Brian Thomas are kind of sat and don't come back, I do think that they're going to be able to at least have the opportunity to just build momentum and get on the right schedule going into next season, even if it is under new coaching and new management. There's plenty of other exciting new players like Ventrell Miller. I'm still a believer in Travis Etienne, even though he didn't have the greatest game ever today. But yeah, I think it'll be exciting to look forward to the rest of the season, even if they're probably, I don't know if they're mathematically eliminated quite yet, but it's pretty much there for the playoffs.
Yeah, I'm going to just call an audible and let the 3,000 of you know, Gus, just, maybe be on standby tomorrow morning in case we have to do a nice emergency emergency podcast live with y'all on Duval Rundown tomorrow morning. That may happen. I can also tell you that in my personal experience covering this team, I have covered firings that have occurred at 12:51 a.m. I won't make Gus wake up to do that podcast. But yes, that is the time that Urban Meyer was fired on a Wednesday night. And while I don't expect a 1 a.m. firing this go round, something tells me we will be hearing something in the morning. And when we do, we, of course, will have you posted on the very latest here on the 1010XL Jaguars YouTube channel and 1010XL.
Absolutely. We will likely be back tomorrow, but if not, we will definitely be back on Tuesday with Coach Campo at 9:04 to break down just whatever we need to break down, but especially just the past few performances from the team, especially like getting that perspective from a former NFL head coach. Me will be back on the show on Thursday to help me just talk about whatever state we are at with the Jaguars, since the Jags don't have a game next week. They're entering their Week 12 bye, but I'm sure we still have plenty to talk about. Another YouTube commenter said, from a Lions fan, I know how y'all feel. It will get better. We appreciate that. It's almost rock bottom for us, and the Jaguars have hit a lot of rock bottoms. So, yeah, hang in there, everyone. We will see you probably tomorrow, definitely sometime soon. Thank you to Injury Care Centers. Thank you to all of you.